Hello, my name is Elliot Callard, and today I'm going to be talking about what the UK can learn from Brazil. I'm going to introduce Brazilian collectives, look at the issues that led to their formation, what they do, something called a trade exchange and Cubo cards, a bit of history, look at the UK versus Brazil, some problems with collectives for the UK, their benefits, conclusions, and then any questions. With funding cuts across the arts sector, 15% from the Arts Council and around 200 million from local councils, personal disposable income decreasing per family on average of 2%, venue closures with the Mask and the CUC closing in Liverpool, and the UK's return to recession with the economy shrinking 0.3%. Times are pretty tough for everyone in the independent music industry. What I'm going to be talking about today isn't a saviour of the music industry, as lots of journalists seem to think all these things are. It isn't concerned with major labels or chart-topping artists. The music industry I will be referring to is a small-scale labels, small bands who play 500 capacity shows, book their own tours, and exist without any support from labels or management. The ability of these musicians and artist managers to build their careers in the music industry will always be a challenge, especially when, as I've mentioned, the economy is shrinking. But Brazil have pioneered a new solidarity economy for the independent music industry, allowing everyone the opportunity to earn a sustainable living. Fora do Ixo is a network of collectives from every state in Brazil who work to support new independent music locally, nationally, and from across the world. Fora do Ixo means off-axis. It was established in early 2000 as a response to a number of issues facing Brazilian music. I'm going to talk about a few. The economic axis of Brazil is just that bit there, Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. This is where economic power, major labels, population, tourism and investment are all concentrated. This is where big bands who visit Brazil play, festivals like Rock in Rio attract artists such as Coldplay, Guns N' Roses, Bruce Springsteen and Rihanna. For musicians outside that little black box, they have struggled to tour or gain any kind of foothold in the music industry before Fora do Ixo began. The size of Brazil, it was also a massive problem for bands. The country is 6,000 kilometres from top to bottom, and travel infrastructure outside the economic access is quite poor or prohibitively expensive in a country where 16 million people live on the equivalent of £27 a month. This meant that bands without major label backing weren't able to tour outside their own little area, and they were confined to selling their own music just in that little space. Digital sales in Brazil haven't really taken off in the same way they have here, with iTunes only launching in the country last year. The music industry in Brazil, in comparison with Europe, is incredibly small. Daniel Bruce Duarte from Fora do Ixo has said that they come from a way of life in Brazil, the idea of working together to get something done and not relying on anyone else to do it for you. He said, the music industry in Brazil is big business for maybe 5 people. The rest of us, we have to do it ourselves. He argues that it must be better to have everyone earning a bit of money and being able to make music than having 5 big famous bands and the rest of the industry living in poverty and struggling to continue their careers. This small music industry meant that there was a lot of unused capacity in Brazil. Places like recording studios, live music venues, and for people like designers, technicians, producers, managers, all weren't working to their full capacity. Fora do Ixo means it's a way of working that is sustainable for all in independent music, and it means everyone is able to work more, earn more, and spend less. They work on the long tail principle. The big red bar on the right is big bands who can sell a lot of tickets, a lot of CDs, and the yellow little strip is all the small bands who, when looked at individually, they don't sell that much, but when taken as a whole, they sell even more than the big red bar. It's these bands who Fora do Ixo worked with and aims to help their careers. They're often cash poor, especially at the start of their careers, but time and skill rich. Fora do Ixo allows bands and artists to use their skills to develop their careers without the need for a lot of money to cover the costs of recording or touring, for example. The collectives operate as a network of friendships where they work together to give support to musicians, like allowing them to stay at their house, allowing them to tour the country, driving them around, selling their CDs for them, cooking for them, designing their posters, running their lights, or promoting their shows. This means that musicians aren't constrained by poor finances and cultural production can increase. This has been facilitated by the growth of the internet. Services like Skype, Facebook and Twitter allow connections to develop across the massive country of Brazil. With Fabrício Nobre, one of the founders of Fora do Eixo, saying that without the internet it would be impossible for them to do what they do today. The growth of technology and the internet in Brazil has meant that collectives, along with the Brazilian Central Bank, have been able to establish something called a trade exchange for everyone in the music industry. It operates on a system of bartering, which Sullivan describes as a method of exchange by which goods or services are directly exchanged for other goods or services without the need for a medium of exchange such as money. This bartering was first used extensively in the spice trade in the 7th century, where silk, gold or weapons were traded with countries like India and China for spices and exotic foods. This was bartering on an informal scale where each trader decided what the deal was and what was exchanged between the two parties. Bartering was formalised with trade exchanges. These are organisations which keep account of all trades and act as the middleman between the two parties. The trades take place with a barter currency, which exists only within the exchange. This is the currency of Fora do Eixo, called Cuba cards. This currency allows artists, managers, producers, agents, studio owners and promoters to operate without the need for a lot of money. The collectives began just there in Cuiabá, when a group of students hoping to support their local music scene bought a recording studio and a venue. The average fee for an hour of studio time was 50 real, which meant a lot of bands were unable to record because they couldn't afford to. They therefore decided to charge 15 real, with the remaining 35 owed in a currency which they called Cuba cards. This was then owed by the bands to the studio. The band could then exchange their services to pay the remaining 35 Cuba cards to the studio. This could be done by playing a gig in their venue where the door take was split between the band and the studio, or working at the bar, running the lights, or anything else they were able to do. Bands can earn Cuba cards by using their talents and getting paid with Cuba cards rather than cash, which many promoters don't have. They can then use this currency for anything from getting cover art designed, paying a tour manager, getting recording done, or even at restaurants, on planes or trains, on phone contracts, allowing them to live and work without the need for a second job. Fora do Eixo has also generated the equivalent of £35 million investment for independent music in Brazil, which without them would not have been secured. This has come from sponsorship, investment, government and other public sector contributions, and lots of other areas. They have arguably been of massive benefit to the culture and creative life in Brazil, as well as the economy of these areas, which otherwise wouldn't have been visited by bands and ignored by commercial music and major label artists. It's led to a huge growth in festivals across Brazil, which here are a few of them. They're all run by Fora do Eixo, and this has become a touring circuit for smaller bands from across the country who otherwise would not have been able to get out their own city to play. The issues that affect music in Brazil, including economic, cultural and population concentration in one relatively small area, geographic distance between the towns and cities, poverty, are all not directly replicated in the UK, but there are some parallels between the two countries. In the UK, the economy is concentrated in Greater London and the South East, with population, economic investment and the creative industries located primarily in this area. The size of the country makes these problems less pronounced, but they still play a part in the lives of musicians and managers in the UK. It's possible to travel from the top to the bottom of the country in a day, which is a journey that would take 7 days in Brazil, so it kind of does minimise the problem a little bit. Musicians not having any money is also a problem directly applicable to the UK, with the PRS stating that the majority of musicians earn less than £5,000 per year from their publishing, with the PPL saying pretty much all musicians earn less than £16,000 per year. The geographic distance between cities is much smaller in the UK, but even so, bands may still struggle to afford to get between towns or cities on a tour. Musicians I've spoken to have, when researching this presentation, have complained of being ripped off at every opportunity by managers, promoters, agents and labels, all looking to make the biggest percentage from bands just starting out. The top quote is from a guy called Louis Barabbas, who runs a label called Debt Records in Manchester. He said, "The UK circuit does its best to make amateurs out of us all. Success is treated like some sort of lottery, only far more expensive. The assumption being that progress cannot be made without the intervention of some expert, some aficionado, a fat man with a cigar and a big car." The bottom quote is from a guy called Nestor Matthews, who's drummer in Skylarkin, Napoleon III, and also a tour manager. He said, EU promoters have tended to be more appreciative and enthusiastic. That's not to say all UK promoters aren't. I think it's to do with the commercialisation of touring promotion in the UK. It's becoming a homogenous business venture in the UK, whereas in the EU, it's still more of a vocational aspiration. The implementation of a similar system to Fora de Waitzo in the UK could be one solution to the problems and difficulties of the music industry, but there may be some problems. Felipe Antenfelder has talked about the importance of this guy, Gilberto Gil. He was the Minister for Culture at the time when Fora de Waitzo began. He has said that without Gil's policies and help, the collectors would never have been established. Gil emphasised the importance of culture and creativity as something more than just a means to make a profit. He led the Brazilian government towards being completely open source and encouraged community organising and cultural development at a grassroots level. As I mentioned at the start of this presentation, this isn't about music as a tool to simply make money, but rather music as a part of life, as culture and to do good. To steal a phrase from my boss, this is about more music, less industry. If a system such as Fora de Waitzo were to be possible in the UK, I believe a figure like Gilberto Gil would be necessary to provide the initial catalyst and to create the conditions necessary for a solidarity economy to thrive. I think it's fair to say that such a figure probably isn't going to come from the current government. But a level of government support will be crucial to the success or failure of a UK Fora de Waitzo. Whether this is the Prime Minister, DCMS, local authorities or the Arts Council, some kind of support will be crucial. The UK has a more well-developed economy than Brazil, which may pose some problems. The trade exchange aspect of the collectors means that transactions that would otherwise have resulted in VAT being paid no longer earn any revenue for HMRC, which they probably wouldn't be too happy about. Having government support would be a possible way of minimising this risk. The differences between Brazil and UK societies and our cultures would mean that simply transferring Fora de Waitzo from Brazil to the UK wouldn't work. We don't have the same tradition of entrepreneurship or self-reliance in our attitudes towards music, especially live music. It's very different to Brazil's, where music plays an integral part of the life of the country with stuff like Carnival. Any effort to introduce collectors to the UK also wouldn't happen overnight. The creation of the right conditions would take a great deal of time. It took around 4 years in Brazil. But the encouragement of working collaboratively on the local level and then increasing the connections between towns and cities across the country could produce massive benefits for all of our audiences and ourselves. The commercialisation and the competitiveness of the current music industry could be replaced by a fairer and more sustainable system where everyone is able to earn. The music industry's desire to constantly find the next big thing could be replaced with an industry that will support artists and allow their growth over time rather than dropping them if their first single doesn't go top 5. Bands and arts managers may not feel the constant pull towards London. With local scenes around the country connected that need to move to London to find work would hopefully disappear. Personally, I would hate to have to move to London to work in the industry I want. And a more vibrant, sustainable and adaptable music industry across the country could remove some of the stranglehold that the South East and Greater London has on their creative industries at the moment. For the Waxo means bands get heard by more people and so make more money, can sell their music to more people. Arts managers make more money by getting to work with more hard-working bands and more appreciative audiences, and the public get to hear more new music, which can only be a good thing. The solidarity economy means that everyone works on an equal footing. I do something for you, you do something for me. There's no question over which was harder or worth more. The idea behind the project is that simply by helping each other out, the wider economy will benefit both economically and culturally. When I first started researching this topic, it seemed as though it completely bypassed the need for arts managers entirely. Daniel from Fora de Waxo has said that their purpose is to help bands get around the middleman, taking a cut of their earnings. But rather than meaning us as arts managers are no longer required, it means we need to be better. Instead of just being interested in our 20% off the top, Fora de Waxo shows that if we work together with artists and more collaboratively with each other, then we will benefit massively, and so will our industries. We will be able to earn more, there will be more jobs in more parts of the country, more music and more opportunities for growth. Brazil has pioneered a new way of working that the UK, Europe and the US can and should learn from. Thanks.
Any questions for Elliot? Phil?
How does this collaboration differ from the cooperative movement in this country?
And the question is, how is this scheme different than the cooperative movement in this country?
It's quite similar. They said that they were inspired by kind of labour movements in Europe, but this is has been the only example that I've found that has been successful in transferring that so completely towards independent music. And the use of the trade exchange is another thing that no one else seems to be doing, but Brazil seems to be doing especially well.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I see how musicians make money through selling their songs and all that, but if they're paying studios and stuff for this, near enough we're not going to afford so money.
Yeah.
How do the studios and people make money out of that?
Well, they have the 15 real that they get initially, which kind of covers their costs basically, and then with the solidarity economy currency, they're able to sort of buy services which otherwise would have been what they were spending the rest of that cash on. And with the cost, the actual monetary cost being so low, more bands choose to come to them, so they earn more money than they would otherwise if they charge 50 real.
Any other questions? Okay, very good. Well done, Eric.